Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women's Growth Series. I am Brianna Harris from AIME, and I'm here today with Lindsay Sills and Stefani Hale. We are going to be talking about being a self-processor and hiring a processor. So before we start, I would love for the both of you to talk about how long you've been in the industry and just a little bit about your business model. Stefani, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I have been in mortgage since about 2014, and then I went over to the broker world in 2017. So first was under a different broker, and then we opened up Trish's Mortgage Group, which is Serendipity, is our local team, and we opened our group in 2018. So our model, I have a team, so I have 5 loan officers that work here with me in an office, and then my partner Brooke Mason works in another office. So right now, we don't have any internal processors, so we have 2 assistants and 5 loan officers.
Wonderful. Lindsay?
I've been in the broker world mortgage space since 2000, so forever. I opened Care Finance Group back in 2017, and we have always had processors. I'm a firm believer in having a team. It's just me. I'm the only loan officer with a team of 4 people.
Awesome. So you've always had a processor going into it. Did you ever have a time where you had to learn how to be a processor or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually, I wasn't always a loan officer. So starting in 2000, I was just a baby. And I worked my way up through the mortgage industry in pretty much every position. So receptionist, processing, assisting, doing all of that stuff. So before I was ever a loan officer. So my background really was in the assisting and processing field. As a loan officer, there have certainly been times where I have had no processor. So I have tried to juggle both, and it's just not something that works for me. I like to be able to focus on the one thing that I do really well, and that's client acquisition and having those counseling talks with the clients on what we're doing and being really in the loan officer space. So I'm a firm believer in having a team to do the things that I'm not the best at, which is
that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, what works for you, it doesn't always work for other people, but at least you know what you like to do. Yeah. Stefani, how do you manage everything? You know, processing your loans, being a broker, all of that. What do you have in place to help you manage things?
So we have a lot of my choice of process is kind of a mix with being a little bit of a control freak on some things. And so really, we still have assistants in place that do some of the kind of more basic processing tasks, if you will. But pretty much every file just works the same, whether it's coming from another loan officer, whether it's my personal client, but they come in and our assistant. So I have one assistant that just assists the brokerage, and then there are assistants for the different loan officers. But the one that directly assists inside the brokerage, she kind of follows the exact same process. She does all of the setup, preps all of the disclosures, kind of goes through and does kind of, I guess, what a preliminary processor would do. And then what comes to me is everything as it's going into. So I'm the final look on any LE, the underwriting, things like that. Honestly, we use a lot of the tools. We are super dependent on Asana and Slack, and that's how we all communicate. So every file that comes in, it's kind of predetermined who does what pieces, and then so it just kind of goes through that file flow, and that works flow throughout. And once it comes back to closing, then I handle all of the closings on the files. So there's a little bit of back and forth, and we just kind of identified, things that are time consuming. So I don't order payoffs. I don't write letter of explanations. I don't do those those tasks. Those are assigned out to the assistants.
Okay. So, and that's great that you have an assistant. Did you ever have a point, especially in this last year, that you felt really overwhelmed and considered hiring? And what was that conversation like with yourself?
So yes, coming from the banking world, we had processors. So you had your processing team and a setup team. Over the summer, there was a few points where we hit, more than you could probably manage, lots and lots of late nights. But really, I think my issue with but the reason I don't have a processor is I feel like it's a little bit easier because I do like things such a certain way for me to hire people on more of a task-oriented basis. So we did bring in, a third assistant over the summer who works with us, and we've just kind of delegated things out and created positions where it supports, the preference in the way that I want it to go, but also loosens up some of that time and brings needs more support in, so that we're not missing the service side of things, because there's a really fine line between being so inundated with paperwork that you're not there to service your clients, and especially, my personal clients. So I have my own pipeline, of course, that I manage too. And so that was kind of the breaking point was, okay, we need to find somebody else. What else can we kind of task out to create an extra position and release some of that processing responsibility?
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. I know a big pain point from talking to other brokers is when you're hiring a processor, finding somebody who does things the way that you like them to be done, being able to put all of your trust into that person. So Lindsay, how did you find your processors?
Oh, it's been a trial and error process for sure. So and let me just tell you about the errors. We'll start right there. The errors are not having a clear-cut idea of what I want them to do. So hiring someone and not knowing what they're going to do, or having a clear-cut idea of the tasks that I want them to take over, kind of what Stefani was saying, is the number one way to fail when you're hiring, whether it's an assistant, a processor, a junior loan officer, junior processor, anyone. So that was a lot of trial and error basis for myself. Once I wrote down a full-on checklist of everything that I wanted done, how I wanted it done, that way it's really giving someone the tools that they need to do that job in exactly the way I want it done, so that I don't have those issues and I don't run into frustrations in hiring someone. Once we had that done, it was pretty easy to find the personality fit that we needed. I need somebody who's a driver and someone who's also task-oriented and likes detail. So we used a DISC profile and really looked and found that person. My processor now is a rock star, so I'm super happy that we did finally find someone. But yeah, having clear written SOPs, just your operating procedures, is a key in finding someone, because it dials in what do you need in that person.
Yeah. And how do you communicate with them in order to know how they're processing your loan, making sure that they do everything right, or just having that constant check-ins? What do you do with them?
So we use the tools that we use. We're currently we have our tech stack is FlowFi, Jungo, and Calyx Point. We're actually doing a huge migration of our tech stack. The only thing that is staying is FlowFi. Okay. But we also use RingCentral. So we're all on one communicating hub, so to speak. So we lean on the database, and daily communications are RingCentral. I do have to say, I'm at home right now because I have a 3-week-old, but we work in the office. So I get to look at her and we talk all day.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you, with having a new baby, and congratulations, by the way, but how has your work schedule changed, or have you had to rely a little bit more on other people in the office? Yeah, I have had to rely on everyone a little bit more. We spent months planning for my transition to be out of the office more often, because I am someone who goes to the office every single day. I get there at, about 9. I leave sometimes 6 or 7. That's just my routine. So me being out of the office was a big change for my whole team. But we've been preparing for it for months. So in that, everyone's shifted and transitioned pretty well. It's weird not having me there. I just talked to my processor. She's like, I miss you. So awesome. I'm like, I miss you guys too. But it is nice to be able to be home. And yeah, that's one of my huge reasons for having a team. Everyone is able to take a vacation or take time off when they need it. Or like me, I have a baby. I can be home with her, work a little bit, assist my team, but I know that they've got it covered. Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice to have a team. And I mean, you touch on a little bit, but it can be really hard to find that team that works the best for you. And it's so important to just know what you want, delegate it out, find that person. If the person doesn't fit, go on to that next one. Yeah. Even though it can be brokers are so busy right now, taking that time out to train, making sure you're finding the right person, that's a whole nother obstacle on its own. It is. Can I touch on that for a moment? Absolutely. It's a big obstacle. I see it talked a lot about in the groups. I don't have time to hire someone. It's going to be too time consuming, that time piece, because we're all pressed so much for time. Mm-hmm. If you take a weekend, write down what you want them to do,
take the moment to hire someone. The amount of time that they're going to save you and the amount of benefit you're going to get from finding help far outweighs the time you're going to spend sitting down, writing, and finding someone. Hands down. Yes, every time I hire someone new, I have to slow myself down a little bit, but the benefit far outweighs the cost.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And it can, I've talked to a couple of brokers who are at that point where they're like, should I hire? They're so nervous to do it. Do they need an assistant first or just to go to the processor? How to delegate those tasks, letting go. It can be a little scary.
It can. It's worth it.
Yeah. So Stephanie, I love that you have assistants and things in place and you delegate different tasks. Talk a little bit more about that. Like, what do you rely on for your assistants to do, and how do you separate different tasks to them?
So I have, I guess, would be kind of more like an LOA position for one of them. So basically, I mean, she does all of my, incoming applications, qualifies people, puts them in AOS, sets the file up for me. We use Lending Pad for our, main, I guess, LOS system. So she does that. She prices it, figures out where it's going to go. So she does a lot of that front end part of the transaction. From there, let's say, client moves forward or gets under contract, something like that. That's where our assistant, that I would say, was kind of more maybe a junior processor would be in a way a position. But so she comes in, she does all of our files set up as far as entering in the contracts, getting it loaded into the lender, things like that. Double checking documents. We use Flowify, which is a huge, that implementing that last year was probably a game changer. Like that was almost like its own little assistant because it keeps us all on the same page. So, I mean, that's her job. She goes in, looks through things, gets anything else that we need, stuff like that. Once they have the package ready and it's what would go to processing or things like that, obviously in the meantime, I'm in the middle with the realtor, the client, as they're making their contracts and doing stuff like that. But from an operation standpoint, processing, I step back in, again, right before the LE goes out, double checking everything, making sure that, I'm ready to go. So assistant orders title, orders insurance, orders payoffs, again, writes any LOXs, does all of that time consuming stuff. And then I come back in to handle the underwriting so that really so that I'm the main contact for, especially we use a lot of UWM, a lot of home point. I want to be the phone call. So if there's an issue on a file, that's really one of the biggest reasons that I would say I always go on as the processor, is just regardless if it's my file or one of the other loan officers, at a point where there's something wrong, I want to be the phone call, and so that's kind of why we set it up that way. And then throughout the process, where I'm just as involved with the client, realtors, as we go through all of our appraisal, things like that. Once it closes, so I do the closing part, depending on which lender we're using and how involved that is. And then post-close, it goes back to our assistant, I would say Lexi with 3, so she goes back to her, and then she does the audits on the files. So she goes in, and regardless of which LO closes the file, she's the one who goes in, prepares all of our payroll stuff, does all the final audits, makes sure everything is set up, and then it just kind of flows through, that process.
Okay, that's a great system, and that's very detailed. So I want to get into like some obstacles that both of you face with being a processor, with hiring processors. We talked about the trust and things like that, but Stephanie, has there been any other things that you've had to really juggle, whether it's, with your personal life and having certain things on your plate? What has 2020 been like, and how have you maneuvered all of that?
Yeah, so we still have hiccups. If we have more than one file that reaches a point where, it's needing a restructure, there's, something crazy going on. I attempted to take a vacation and, my kids are very understanding. Prior to this, I worked crazy hours on the retail side too. But I'll tell you, my saving grace, my partner, Brooke Mason, the two of us decided to open the brokerage together. And we both have that processing, control, operations kind of part of us. And that's kind of our, saving grace, because, there reached a point where I had one of my loan officers file had an issue, another client, nightmare walkthrough before closing, and I am on the side of a mountain with no service. And that was probably a point of like almost tears, because I didn't have a way to get somebody else I needed somebody to be me for a minute and be able to go in. And that I would say is, sometimes the downfall of not having a processor. At the bank, my processor, she'd processed for 30 years. So she had seen everything. Having some of the newer people to the business and using multiple lenders and stuff, that definitely can create a backflow. And again, the saving grace is having Brooke, because doesn't matter what the file is, she could log in. Typically, we think just alike, and being able to step in and save those files, or save the issue or keep it from me. But travel, like you mentioned, that is hard. However, it's kind of a give and take though, because I feel like when I had a processor that was full-time processing, I was constantly on the phone, if there was an issue, and so we have to talk through, and for me, and it works better for me to have these other roles because it's more transactional for them. And there's very few things that they need me for, because some of those harder pain points or things that decisions needed to be made are kind of already coming to me anyways, if that makes sense. And so that's really helped to the point where we're able to go or just bring them on vacation. So like my assistant's coming on vacation with us for spring break. It's like we're just all going together.
I love it. That's amazing. And though you don't have a processor, having that other person that you would trust to make the right decision or to do, that's so important. And for some women who don't have, they're just a one woman shop, and it's got to be incredibly difficult to be able to step away. And
before we brought on any assistant, believe me, there were points of tears and stress, and I didn't want to let go of anything, like not even somebody putting a 3.2 in the lender. I was like, nope, I'll do it. And so I did have to reach a point of, and again, it kind of came earlier when I was, coming from the banking world and stuff, but where I missed so many things with my kids, and I couldn't do stuff because I'm pulling up and I'm on my computer, and it was something that realistically, like Lindsay said, stop and teach somebody those things. And finding that balance between what things you can let go of, because some people can let go of more than others, but reaching that breakdown point and seeing my service levels, not being able to pick up the phone, not being able to do stuff because I'm doing processing tasks. There definitely comes a point where you've got to find one way or the other to ease up your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that work-life balance is so incredibly important, and we can preach it all day, and people can say what they want in their lives, but you really need to take the action steps to make sure that you can have that balance. And hiring, like Lindsay said, is so important. Lindsay, when it comes to hiring, what do you look for in a processor? What are characteristics? Are they in the mortgage industry prior? Give me the lowdown.
So I love to hire completely green people. So my entire team has zero mortgage industry experience other than our office. My processor actually was my friend for 12 years. And she came and sat down at my desk and she said, I need a job right now. And I was like, you know what? I got something you could do. She happens to be just a pit bull in life. And I knew that processing was going to be her calling. And I hope that it was. She sat down and she just turned into a complete rock star. And I was like, gosh, why didn't I think of this a long time ago? But normally what we look for is we use a service called Wise Hire. And it gives us a resume and the disc test, all in one. It works like a mini CRM for hiring. It's fantastic. Disc test, SCs, high S, high C, low D, can be a mid-range I. If anyone doesn't know what the disc test is, I highly recommend that you use it, study it, take it yourself. I'm a high D. So let's just call it a driver. I'm the A-type personality. I'm the driver. I'm the loan officer. I'm the manager in the office, of course. SCs tend to be detail-oriented, focused, loyal. So that's what we look for. Very task-oriented mindsets. We look at more than that on just a disc, but that's a really overall basics. We start there. And then if they are high SC, bring them in for an interview. And we look at personality. Are they going to be a fit for our team? A question that we ask ourselves before we hire anyone is, would I go on vacation with this person? Kind of like Stefani was saying, like when she's taking our assistant on vacation, we have the same thing. So if we meet company goals, we all go on a trip together. So I want to be able to go on vacation with that person. I'm going to hang out with them for 9-10 hours a day in the office. Are they cool? Do I like them? That's a big factor. Personality. So yeah, personality and disc test. That's what I look for in hiring.
What are some things that you've run into with people that maybe weren't a great fit? Have you run into that?
Absolutely. Motivation, drive. I tell people when I hire, because we hire green, I say the mortgage industry, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. It's going to eat you alive or you're going to thrive. So those are the couple of things that we say. And it really does weed people out in the first month or so. You can either handle the stress of this industry or you can't. The people that survive are the people that thrive. I know that rhymes. Catchy little thing. They really do thrive. My friend, for example, she's a rock star processor. She absolutely tells me every day that she loves her job. Her sister actually works for us now as well. But I've had previous loan officer assistants who haven't worked out. I thought they'd be a great fit, but this industry just wasn't for them. So that's really a personal thing. I think the people have to find that in themselves, especially if they don't have any previous industry experience.
Yeah. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, but like we said, women are in the process of, should I hire? I really want to. I don't know how to get into it. What do I need? What more advice would you give to them about just jumping in and doing it? Like how should they even really begin?
If you are doing, look at it on a volume. If you're doing 5 to 10 deals a month, you can hire an assistant. Budget for that. Save up a little. I know it's scary for the first time. I was terrified being out on my own, hiring someone for the first time. Like, gosh, can I support this person? I now have someone's income on my shoulders, not just my own. I know it's scary. Bite the bullet and do it. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like your family's health and well-being is taking a bath because you're so slammed, you're working till 2 a.m., hire someone. If it's too scary to hire someone full-time, hire someone part-time. Sit for a weekend, write down the tasks. Just bite the bullet and do it. You will be thankful that you did.
Now, this is talked about a lot in the groups with pay around your processor. Do you wait until the loan is closed to pay? Do you have what does your structure look like, and how do you compensate your processor?
All of my employees are hourly employees. We do bonus based on performance and production. Production, I say, kind of is the latter. If we have a great month, obviously I want to reward my team, but it's mostly based on performance. So they have performance goals, getting a file, not closed, but getting a file CTC'd in, a week or less. So we have some performance goals. So we bonus based on that, but everybody's hourly.
Okay. I like that structure. And it's interesting to see how different brokers do it, because some will wait until it's completely closed. Some will just do it in advance. So it's interesting to get your take on that. So Stephanie, what is some advice that you would give women who don't want to hire a processor? They enjoy doing it themselves. They still get a little stressed out. How can we help them streamline a little bit better?
So I think for one, it's some people, what I see as some differences on contract processing versus not. So I feel like if it's a person who's, because contract processing would be even farther of a struggle for me to kind of have that far away. But I think first with just figuring out what that structure looks like. So if your breakdown is the fact that it's an outside person and you're having to spend the time, it's like adding one more, communication piece, then I think if you've got enough business to keep a contract processor busy, you probably should just hire. If it's somebody who, like Lindsay was saying, when you get to 5 to 10 loans, I think the fear of bringing somebody on is super stressful. I know when I first brought my first person, I was like, oh my gosh, she has kids, like she has to feed her family. That part is a little bit, it can be stressful. And so, like starting part-time, figuring out what those small little pieces are on their day. I believe in time blocking. So if you figure out, especially as a loan officer side of it, you can't put 8 hours of your day time blocked for processing, because then you're not doing sales and you're not doing retention, you're not doing all the other things. So I would say first, just figuring out, where does your time go and what little things could you give up? Maybe you start with an assistant that writes your thank you cards, or you start with an assistant who is running your CRM for you, but give up some of those tasks first. And then slowly, that person gets into the industry, starts working with you, and you might be able to find some more activities that you can pass on. But if you're using somebody from an hourly perspective and starting with some of those smaller tasks, just that freedom and the time, maybe help figure out if it's more of a fear of bringing somebody on or fear of not processing your files.
And that makes a lot of sense. That's a lot of really good insight. Before we wrap up today, I just wanted to open up the floor, and if there's anything else that you would like to communicate with the Women's Mortgage Network about self-processing, hiring, anything like that, I would love for the both of you to have that opportunity.
Yeah, I'd love to just say that, we have this amazing group of women. We all deal with different struggles, different challenges. I would say stand up, raise your hand, ask for help. It can seem really scary, especially in some of the groups, or to reach out to someone on an individual basis that you think might be able to help you based on what they've been posting. But reach out, ask for help. I'm always around. It's the only time to be like, hey, DM me. Yeah, reach out, raise your hand. I know it can be scary, but asking for help is much better than sitting and not knowing.
I agree. And our group has grown so much, and it's such a great place of support, and there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah.
And absolutely, don't be afraid to reach out. Somebody's going to be there to help you.
Yep.
Yep. Stephanie, do you have any closing words?
Yeah, so I would say, first, I think this group, has been absolutely fantastic. And you can identify with people who have very similar. There's so many of us that have brokerages that run alike and different. And then two, when you do think about bringing people on, I will say probably very similar. So our entire team has grown from people that we've worked with, people's families members joining in and things like that. And so what could be a super stressful, isolating job, really, it's amazing to see who you can bring on. My assistant, when she started, she was just my bulldog. That was it. Just hound people, get stuff, whatever. And now she's, exceeding $1 million a month in sales. She's now evolving into a loan officer. She loves the sales side of it. So to be able to bring other women into your company and teach them from the beginning and then watch them flourish and, hopefully eventually outsell you, it's amazing. And so we have an entire network of those people. So just finding somebody that has that same structure or has something similar, and definitely getting the advice, but continuing to grow women in this business, I think, is what's awesome about our group the most.
That is very true. And I'm so glad that the both of you were able to talk with me today. You have so many incredible insights into how to run a successful brokerage and how to delegate your tasks. And as business gets crazy, it's really important for everybody to reflect and realize what options are there and how to streamline a little bit better. So thank you both for joining me today. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and we look forward to the next episode of the Women's Growth Series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.